is the top of the hour. Cary Harrison with you. This is Harrison's Reality Check. Welcome. Glad you're joining me. Programming note, next week I am going to be out of town. Greg Palast will be subbing in for me. I am taking a cultural group to the Galapagos Islands to see the great turtles, to see the place where Chuckles Darwin really came up with his origin of species. It was that very part on the planet off of Ecuador where he was able to note how we came to be. So I'm going to be taking a group, and I'd like to be taking you sometime down the road. We are going to talk about Ukraine. We are going to talk about everything that is going on right now, live, real time. But I'm just letting you guys know what's going to go on. A couple of years ago, I took a group of about 20 of you to Cuba, the last trip to Cuba before the plug was pulled by President Trump. We knew it was going to happen, and we got to do a lot of cool stuff. We were met by Mariela Castro's chief of staff, and we were given a special VIP welcome and a special VIP tour through their NGO medical services called Cenesex, Cenesex, which is an entire second medical system running alongside their state medical system. And as you know, their doctors are outsourced all over the planet for their excellence in care. Well, this was sort of an LGBT specialty that Mariela was running to provide HIV drugs and other things which are forbidden to enter Cuban soil. Why? Because they're created by U.S. companies, and anything with more than a 3% U.S. fingerprint, footprint, thumbprint, boot print on it is not allowed to be in Cuba. Therefore, they get to die. Boom, done. No problem. Look away, move on, buy a new car. And they haven't bought a new car since 1959. And we saw those cars, which are beautiful. To us, it's like, well, what a beautiful collector's. No, it's the family car. Please get out of the way. The DeSoto, we're taking it to the grocery store. Quite an experience. So I do these cultural tours, and I want to create a new one for KPFK for our listeners, because guess what? Instead of just a lot, as we do ask you for money, for support, and we do it a lot, and it is just the nature of where we're at and where things are, and how limited independent media is in its existence. So we're forced to do that. But I'm a fan, being a radio guy, of rewarding the listener. So instead of you just showing up for us forever and ever, amen, we need to show up for you. So I'm going to put together a trip so you get to go and do and see things and hang out with other listeners whom you like, who think like you, who act like you, probably have table manners like you, which we would like to think are good. I'd like to think they're good. I bring my good table manners with that. And we get to enjoy all of these cool things, learning experience, and really grow together and have fun. Because this is a radio station at the end of the day. Okay, enough of that. Get my free newsletter so I know who you are. So when I do put something together like this, I can let you know. GoHarrison.com, GoHarrison.com. Free newsletter. I'm about to get the first one out. A few hundred of you have already signed up. Yay. Good for you. The newsletter is free. It's for fun. It's the stuff we can't do on an FCC radio station, any FCC radio station anymore. So you're going to get the behind the scenes stuff. And also I'm going to be telling you a very special, intimate story of what I'm sort of seeing and going through that I can't really talk about on the radio. It's partial politics, it's part this, it's part that, but I'm going to be sharing some of those stories with you along with other things. And that's the free newsletter at GoHarrison.com. Okay. Coming up in about 20 minutes, we're going to be talking nukes and Russia. As you know, they are the number one nuclear weapons holder in the world. What? Russia? I thought the United States. Well, we were, with many of our anti-nuclear treaties and agreements. We have actually been unusually thoughtful and stuck to our agreements. But Russia, as you know, under Vladimir Putin, who originally had a multi-year terms, gave himself a 36-year term, in other words, until he's dead, like Fidel Castro. And so he's in there forever. And with that, he announces the doomsday weapons that we heard about a couple of years ago, where they can launch these horrific things right out of the ocean and just scour everybody's butt, plus these hyperbaric bombs and other things, which we may or may not see. In which case, we could end up with a nuclear war. Vladimir Putin, let's look at Russia for a second. Now, when a lot of you, me even, growing up, we were told that Russia was, the worst horrible communism in the world because, of course, we couldn't use them to build our stuff cheap. China are communists too, but they're good communists. What? I thought all communists were bad. Well, they are if they don't work with us. They're bad communists. I had this long conversation on that cruise to Cuba with one of the former Reagan deputy secretaries of state. And we were also, he had just gotten back from Vietnam and other places. And we were talking about communism and how bad communism is. And we were talking about Cuba specifically. And they're unforgivable, bad communists. They should starve and die, unforgivable bad. I said, but how are the Vietnamese and the Chinese good communists? How can you have good and bad communists? Well, obviously, we create goods and services on the cheap using next to slave labor in China and Vietnam. And so that's good communism. But he would not get into the syllogism with me, which is obvious. It's either communism is bad or it's good or it's something in between. So, but you can't have those arguments with people because it does boil down to money. It does boil down to money. In fact, the big it in life boils down to money. Money, resources, mineral rights. What's in Cuba, by the way, while we're on that topic? The chief of staff of the daughter of Raul Castro at the time, she still is, Mariela Castro, the daughter, I guess she would be the royalty of the island, if you will. She also spends a fair amount of time here in the U.S. Unlike most Cubans, can't just get up and leave. She's one of the ones that can. Good commie, bad commie. Here we are back with some pigs are greater than others, if you remember George Orwell's Animal Farm. And that was written by an Englishman about the Soviet Union, where he thought it would go, and British overreach on its own citizens at the time, written in 1948 and called 1984. And by 1984, it had almost gotten there, but now it's London is fully covered in cameras and nothing goes unseen or unknown or unheard. So here we are with that. Interestingly enough, Mariela Castro and her chief of staff, who ended up being a good guy, took us out drinking to I don't drink, but other people did, and boy, did they. Boy, did they. We went to a bar called Las Vegas, and you'll remember, there was no Las Vegas before Cuba's embargo. Las Vegas was Havana. That's where everyone went. That's where Frank Sinatra went. That's where Sammy Davis Jr. went. They all went there to Havana. And that's where all the gambling was and all the hotels and Meyer Lansky, and it was showgirls and all over the top. Then you have this big blockade on Cuba. So they go out and they buy a nuclear waste dump, which is hardly a dump yet because there's still a lot more nukes to go off, and a bunch of unlivable land, and buy it on the cheap, throw a road through the middle, and boom, you've got rebooted Havana. Total grift and theft, from the showgirls, except for the language, to every single thing, including the drinks. That said, this chief of staff was telling me that one of the reasons that Donald Trump is going to pull the plug and close Cuba was we had for the first time in 50 years, as you might remember, an open embassy in Cuba. It was closed in, 1959, 1960, 1961. 1961, Fidel Castro spoke to the UN, and after 10 minutes, they cut his mic and kicked him out. Che Guevara ended up in a hotel doing a secret talk, and then he got the big boot. Yeah, a lot of interesting history. But here's the stuff that I love, that you love. The secrets that are not told, the unofficial who's doing what, where, and why. Cary Harrison, by the way, at 11 minutes past the hour. This is Harrison's Reality Check. Coming up in about 10 minutes, we're going to be talking about nukes, Russia, nukes in Ukraine, and how real and how scary could this be? And to what level are the nukes in the United States? Also on hair trigger alert. You can Google hair trigger alert. Not that it isn't really obvious what it means, but maybe you want to Google it just to get a little more skin horripilating on your arm. And that's really what we're dealing with. And what does Vladimir Putin have to lose when his entire economy of Russia is almost equal? It's actually slightly greater than Los Angeles. California. Los Angeles, California is 1.4 trillion. Vladimir Putin commands like 1.04 trillion. So he does not have a whole lot to lose. And his whole world is offshore. All of his oligarchs are offshore, yachting in the Mediterranean here and there. They're not yachting in the Black Sea. They're not yachting in Russia. Unlike here, our billionaires yacht in Miami because we have a lovely country. Somewhere it's lovely all the time. And you can hang out here and you've got the Caribbean or whatever. But all of them don't hang out there. They just suck the money dry. And part of Vladimir Putin's ultimate plot of the play is simply to rebuild the Soviet Union. Now, how do we know that? A couple of years ago in Russia, big public parade. They still like to bring out all of their military stuff, do large parades. Well, what did they have? The Soviet marching Red Army, dressed up in Soviet, call it a costume. Let's just call it a costume and not a uniform, playing the Soviet national anthem and marching. And that's just after Vladimir Putin had declared himself president, premier, whatever you want to call him, chancellor for the next 36 years. This was the hors d'oeuvre of the entree to come. This is about pulling back and rebuilding the Soviet empire. And we'll get into a little bit about NATO, having said at the time of the collapse of the Soviet Union, and in order to ensure that through Gorbachev and others, that NATO would not even 1 inch, literally, quote, not even 1 inch move NATO into Ukraine or any former Soviet satellite countries. Well, that didn't work so well, did it? Kind of everywhere. It's kind of like throwing a water balloon. The droplets land everywhere. This is not a defense in any way, but it's a pretext if you're someone like Vladimir Putin. And you got nothing to lose. You got a country that is a tough place, and you've made it so. You could have turned it into an incredible place after the wall came down, had a proper democracy, a proper government, a proper opportunity for people to own property and work hard and have great education. Their education is still pretty good, but just have a decent life. And you didn't. You just sucked everybody dry because their entire economy collapsed. You went to bed in the Soviet Union. You woke up in Russia. And guess what? All the money you had the day before, which was Soviet money, gone. Those rubles, gone. You had zero on day one. How are you going to get any of that back? And now you have to buy your apartment, which used to be free. And now you have to buy your food, which used to be free. But you don't have a job. How many Soviets died in the first 10 years? Or Russians, former Soviets. We're talking like 10 million. Imagine if we went to bed in the United States and woke up in somewhere else. If one of the states took over the entire nation. Mississippi. We all woke up in Mississippi. There's just not enough food. There's no jobs, or Florida, where you've got this governor. It would be curtains for millions of us who are already having a tough time. I mean, in Los Angeles alone, people are lined up still driving to food banks in 2022 in the United States of America. E pluribus unum? That can't be, but it is. And that's in a state like California that's got the seventh or fifth or sixth, depending on who you ask, largest economy on earth. That's what's going on there. It's still tough. So that's kind of the backstory there. And Cuba, we were talking about that. What's in Cuba that helped Donald Trump close it up? Well, one, you have to close the embassy, because the embassy means you got a lot of people in the U.S. looking at a lot of things going on in Cuba. Cuba has a nickel mine, and it has not been really tapped, not sufficiently tapped, not aggressively tapped since about 1947. And the Russians, boy, do they want that. And the Russians have been friendly with the Cubans ever since the 60s, the Cuban Missile Crisis. You could Google that if you don't remember that, or maybe you've never heard of it. If you're under a certain age, it's just one of these historical things that your parents will tell you about and your grandparents, and they were terrified. We came exceedingly close to nuclear war. Well, there's mining there, potential mining worth billions in nickel. And the Russians want it. And Donald Trump has done so much to help Vladimir Putin. Now, did he intend to? Did he not intend to? Did he have any idea? We don't know. All we know is he's been very helpful. And now they get to mine that nickel. We don't have a U.S. embassy there, and we're not allowed to visit. Done deal. Does Donald Trump get a finder's fee? Don't know. But I will bet you, at the end of all this, we are going to finally see a Trump Tower in Moscow, and we're going to see one in Ukraine. And that's something that Donald Trump has been trying for over 20 years to get built. And I'll bet you he's going to get his thank you very much coming up soon enough. All right, back to what we're talking about. Back to also your calls as we talk to Harvey Wasserman in just a few minutes. He happens to have a certain expertise in all things nuclear, and especially power plants. The Ukraine is filled with nuclear power plants. You knock one of those things down. Remember where Chernobyl was located? Remember when that thing melted down? You could see it from satellites. It covered everywhere, including Scotland. Still, the fallout of Chernobyl is still in the plants. It's still in the meat. It's in the beef. It's in the dairy. It's all over Europe because it scoured Europe because the wind blows. We forget that. Wait a minute. We all breathe the same wind. Yep, whether we like it or not. The wind does not have a border. It does not have a stop sign. It does not have a caution sign. It just blows all over the planet. And it spreads, metastasizes, if you will, to wherever it lands. And Scotland is just one of those classic places, along with Sweden, and even beautiful Switzerland has had to deal with it. But since we don't report on it, we don't know about it, just like Fukushima. Oh, yeah, I remember vaguely something about that, like 8 years ago. 4 nuclear power plants melted down simultaneously, and 3 of them are still melting down as we speak. But I guess it's not that important because I'm not hearing about it. Well, it is very important, and you should be hearing about it. But you're hearing about other stuff. At least Ukraine is being covered, but unfortunately in kind of a weird way. So let's just reset how Western media is falling in lockstep for neo-Nazi publicity stunts all across Ukraine. Cary Harrison with you, 19 minutes past the hour. Coming up in about 5 minutes, we are going to be talking to Harvey Wasserman, historian, also expert on the layout of nuclear stuff. What does it mean in Ukraine? What is Vladimir Putin likely to do now that he has declared without a wink, without kind of a grin or a smirk, that his nukes are on high alert? That would be the offensive nukes, not the defensive nukes. That's the ones that we're ready to deploy. Now, I spoke with Janine Jackson. You probably know that name maybe from Fairness and Accuracy in Reporting. Another reporter named John McAvoy, another one named Bryce Green, and we were really kind of going over what the Western media is doing. Now, according to Vladimir Putin, out of his own mouth, the sole purpose, really, for being in the Ukraine is to fight neo-Nazis and drug addicts. You have watched television, And I'm not talking about highly edited television, but just say live shots that go on for a few minutes. All you see are old ladies, children, and people. You do not see a ton of drug addicts, whatever that's supposed to look like. But I imagine if you need to invade a country because it is so overrun by drug addicts, it is going to look like The Walking Dead on the streets, not like a bunch of people rolling suitcases and holding their children. I'm sorry, it is not. Also, neo-Nazis. Well, we forget that is not entirely untrue, but it's not like they just sort of happened in a vacuum. When the corporate media push for war, one of their main weapons is propaganda by omission. And we know that. When you're a journalist, trained in journalism, as many of us are, you're taught that you have to give both sides. Why? Because if you only give one side, then the listener, the reader, the viewer only knows one side, and 50% of reality is stripped out. And that 50% could balance not only what you just said, it could even refute it. But you're selling an idea. You remember, propaganda is a uniquely American invention by Edward L. Bernays, who then took it over and taught it all to one Dr. Joseph Goebbels in Germany in the 1930s. Another discussion for another time, and one of my very, very favorites, by the way. So in the case of this recent crisis in Ukraine, Western journalists, all of us here, have committed committed by omitting real factual misinformation, by leaving out the key context about the expansion of NATO since the end of the Cold War, as well as support for the Maidan coup in 2014. I mentioned that earlier, that at the end of the Cold War, one of the deals with former Soviet Union, in order for it to dismantle itself, NATO said that it would not move even 1 inch, and it has moved a lot of miles, about at the same pace as the glaciers are melting and receding. So you can imagine what that looks like on a map. Look like that with NATO marching forward. And now we're saying that we want Ukraine to suddenly be part of NATO. Well, all of this flies in the face of an agreement, which is being used as pretext. So a third and crucial case of propaganda by omission relates to the integration of neo-Nazis into the Ukrainian armed forces. True integration of neo-Nazis into the Ukrainian armed forces. This goes back to about 2014. So there was Western support for the neo-Nazi-infested Ukrainian security forces that we know today. Those forces function as a frontline proxy for U.S. foreign policy. In other words, just like we, once upon a time, going back to Afghanistan, Osama bin Laden, you remember that name, a name you've grown to know and love, etc., and all the poor people of Afghanistan for hundreds of years that dealt with the British and everybody else, and the longest war in all of U.S. history being Afghanistan. Well, in order to fight the Russians back in around 1978, the Soviets back in 1978, what did we, the U.S., do? We sent in, through the CIA, about $35 million in financial aid as well as training. Now, $35 million back in 1978, a lot of money. Still a lot of money, but a lot of money. A lot of bang for that buck. And, trained up these guys, including Osama bin Laden. Say that one 10 times fast. And he was on the CIA payroll. Yep, on the CIA payroll, along with many others, including Saddam Hussein, by the way, in Iraq. Different country, different time. So what happens when you then arm these guys up, give them the greatest weapons, the greatest training, car bombing, how to put a vest on with bombs and blow stuff up, all that trained, taught to them by us. Then we split. And that's usually the problem, is when you split and leave them. Well, a lot of them die. Their children grow up with insufficient parenting. And the next thing you know, they much like you read Lord of the Rings, Lord of the Rings. Pardon me, I've got my books and authors mixed up. Lord of the Flies. If you've never read Lord of the Flies, mandatory reading. But it shows what happens when kids with just sort of the basic structure of growing up take over and run it themselves. And you ended up with the Mujahideen and all of these other outfits because we had taken the worst of the worst, armed them to fight our big enemy in a proxy war, the Soviets. Likewise, we're purposely paying neo-Nazis to join the Ukrainian security forces to fight the Russians. So it's true, but they're not the neo-Nazis of the Russians. They happen to be our neo-Nazis. Crazy stuff here. Google it. Search for it. You can look it up at fair.org, F-A-I-R, Fairness and Accuracy and Reporting.org. There are a few media watchdogs that take the time to break this down and go through history. You'll find that many of these stories were told back in 2014, but as then as now, people didn't know where Ukraine was on a map, didn't even know what it was. And neo-Nazis in Ukraine, what does that mean? And it's probably still more or less the same for many people, it turns out. So as recent coverage demonstrates, one way of resolving this issue is not by mentioning this inconvenient matter of Ukrainian neo-Nazis altogether, but Vladimir Putin says he's fighting them. Now, he's not fighting them because many of them are neo-Nazis. He's fighting them. He's saying because they are, that is why he's fighting. Because what could be more offensive to Vladimir Putin, more offensive to a wonderful man such as him, surrounded by oligarchs, as the ruble plummets, goes down 30%, and all of these rich oligarchs are calling him up going, what in the hell are you doing? They're seizing my yachts. They're freezing all of my assets, billions of dollars. You wonderful guy. And really, what could be more offensive to him than a neo-Nazi or a drug addict? Please. Have you ever heard about what the Duma do after midnight? Hang out in some gay bars in St. Petersburg. Not Florida, Russia. You'll know what I mean. Okay, do we have Harvey Wasserman online? I can't quite tell here. I'm trying. He's sending me a text. I'm trying. I'm trying what? I'm trying to get on, I imagine. Hold on. I'm gonna take a pause, and when we return, we will allegedly have Harvey Wasserman on. Not everybody is technologically advanced. I find when older people are tech savvy, that's hot to me. A grandmother with an iPhone that can use it, that's hot. And I know most of us have become tech savvy because it's how we communicate. And we're in the communications business. So part of my mentorship, as was heard in the show previously, I will teach anybody who is over 60, I will be your IT guy. I will teach you how to use all your equipment, get your printer to run wirelessly, how you can build a home studio, how you can build a home office so that you can survive and thrive. And it is never going back. AI is creeping forward. People's physical jobs and physical buildings where companies had to pay rent, had to pay for all of that infrastructure. They're never going to pay again. You are on your own. You are an Uber driver. You need to have the technology working for you so that you can make a living. I will help you, which means I probably need to do a webinar and show you how to do it, and do Q&A and an AMA, which I call Ask Me Anything, because no question is too taboo, because I want you to get on the dime. And there's Harvey. We're going to get to him in just a second. Cary Harrison with you, reminding you, go to my website, get the free newsletter at goharrison.com, goharrison.com. Sign up for that free letter, stuff that we can't say on FCC and stories that I wouldn't dare telling here, especially in these days. And I am going to be sending out the first newsletter soon. Plus, you can follow me across all social media at Go Harrison.
Comrades to Moscow McDonald's. I'm Boris.
And I'm Boris.
Boris, now that Glasnost has gone poo-poo, the big boss don't fool around.
Give you new Mickey G's Fun Meal. For just 1 month's wages, you get 2 fries.
That's right, 2 stringy little fries.
How are we doing, Cary?
Right, KGB agents shake you, strip search you, and take away your cigarettes.
Just be glad they don't kick you in McNuggets.
And for dessert, you get half-rolled toilet paper.
Eat it, use it, your choice.
Big fun meal at Mickey G's.
Remember, no shoes, no shirt,
No Poles,
no Lithuanians,
no Latvians,
no Estonians.
Listen, while it's still legal.
Cary Harrison, Reality Check, live.
Do you want to keep your loved ones from using drugs but aren't sure how? It's simple. Talk to them.
Son, your mom and I are going out.
Yeah? And where are you going?
To a party.
And who's gonna be there?
Just a few friends. Yeah, that's it, friends.
Do I know these friends?
Well.
Talk to your parents about drugs. You have more influence than you know. Plus, they'll listen.
Now, I trust you won't be doing anything you shouldn't be doing at this party.
No, of course not. Oh, no.
Good. I'll be waiting up for you.
You will.
When your parents were teenagers, their parents never talked openly to them about drugs. So, it's up to you.
Have a good time.
What a drag.
Please, talk to your parents about drugs. Children, the anti-drug.
GoHarrison.com. Harrison's Reality Check.
Cary Harrison.
32 minutes past the hour. Cary Harrison with you, your new best friend. Welcome. Coming up in just a second, we're going to talk to Harvey Wasserman, historian, and we're going to talk about the drugs, not really, in Ukraine, and talking to your parents about them because children really are the solution. Vladimir Putin having all of his nukes plus his hyperbaric weapons on high alert. I don't know if you knew that we had rail guns. You probably want to know what those are. And how many nuclear power plants are spread across Ukraine, generally unprotected, and now at the mercy of Vladimir Putin. But before we do that, I'm going to play you a quick BBC report that we got from Roz Atkins. And it's just a rewind of the whole Cold War to bring you up to speed to set the stage of what we're going to be talking about on the other side.
With one announcement, Vladimir Putin left the world asking, would he?
I'm ordering the Minister of Defense and the Chief of the General Staff to put the strategic nuclear forces on special alert.
Russia has the biggest nuclear arsenal in the world, and Putin wouldn't be the first leader to give the order. In 1945, the US dropped 2 nuclear weapons on Japan. They effectively ended the Second World War and killed over 100,000 people. In 1949, the Soviet Union tested a bomb at this test site in what is now Kazakhstan. Then, in 1962, the Cuban Missile Crisis almost brought nuclear war between the US and Russia. And having come so close, in 1968, the world agreed a new arrangement, the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. 191 countries are currently signed up. Nuclear powers agreed to reduce their arsenals. In exchange, others agreed not to have them at all. And in the 70s, the deals between the US and Russia continued. 2 more focused on long-range missiles. And though the rivalry of these superpowers intensified, in 1991, there was the New START Treaty. It aimed to decrease the size of their overall arsenals. And underpinning the West's justification for these weapons is an idea called nuclear deterrence. The UK government fact sheet states that potential aggressors know that the costs of attacking the UK or our NATO allies could far outweigh any benefit they could hope to achieve. The possibility of mutually assured destruction being the strongest of reasons not to press the button. That's the theory, but it's under pressure. This week, the former Russian president, Dmitry Medvedev, warned it may pull out of the New START deal. And both countries still have huge arsenals. America has an estimated 5,428 weapons, Russia an estimated 5,977, all of which is why we're looking to history and the present.
It's not the first time this has happened. It's happened several times during the Cold War. It never, of course, led to nuclear war, but I can't see how this is a positive development for the Ukraine crisis.
That is perhaps an understatement. And today, Russia blamed various comments by the West for its nuclear escalation. The Kremlin spokesperson said, "We believe such statements are absolutely unacceptable. I would not call the authors of these statements by name, although it was the British foreign minister." Now, it seems unlikely that one comment by Liz Truss is the reason Putin feels the need to flex his military muscles. His troops are on day 5 of this war. Kiev hasn't fallen, the West is united, and so he raises the stakes.
This is a reminder of, over Soviet era brinksmanship, nuclear brinksmanship, like we had at the height of the Cold War. But the question is, what is the strategy here? What is the end game? And I wonder if Putin actually understands that or knows that.
We can't know that, but we know Putin's shown scant regard for human lives and international rules. And we know he has the weapons.
BBC's Ross Adkins here on Harrison's Reality Check, where it is 36 minutes past the hour. Cary Harrison with you, reminding you to sign up for my free newsletter at goharrison.com, goharrison.com, where you'll get a copy of this broadcast. Plus, you'll be able to see the videos. We do it as video. And I'm now going to introduce a man on video whose handsome puss is sitting right in front of me. That would be Harvey Wasserman, 50 years experience in writing and researching nuclear power, author, expert, activist, warning that even a conventional war in Ukraine could lead to apoplectic and apocalyptic, certainly both, radiation releases, killing millions, costing trillions. It rhymes, therefore it must be true. Wasserman warns that even minor disruptions, sabotage, explosions, anything could lead to another Chernobyl-sized disaster at any one of the, ready for this number, 15 reactors now operating in Ukraine. 15 radiation releases from Chernobyl itself, he says, killed more than 1 million humans worldwide, irradiated thousands of square miles of land and water, and cost trillions in destroyed property. Harvey Wasserman, I want to welcome you to Harrison's Reality Check.
Well, it's great to be with you, Cary. I wish we were talking about something funnier, but, there are, in fact, 15 operating reactors in Russia, in Ukraine, and that was a Freudian slip because I was about to tell you that those reactors are being run by the Russians. The 12 of the 15 reactors that are now operating in Ukraine were built by the old Soviet Union and went online before the fall of the Soviet Union. They're more than 30 years old. And over the years, Ukraine has maintained a contract with Russia to have Russia help, Putin help run those reactors and to fuel them. So here you have a country, Russia, that has declared war on Ukraine while they are simultaneously operating those nuclear plants.
It makes sense. It makes sense, Harvey, because they built them and they're going to be the only ones that claim they can run and maintain them. And it's also convenient. I mean, Ukraine does not have the sort of balance sheet to be able to run these monsters that the Russians built. And really, this is seizing back and rebuilding the empire. I mentioned earlier, and you might have heard this, Harvey Wasserman, I was talking a little bit about Cuba, and the Russians built a working Chernobyl on Cuba that most Americans still don't know is there. It was active for a whole of 3 weeks and then decommissioned. You can see it from the water, from the Atlantic Ocean. Right. It looks like a major city, like a Taj Mahal with a big dome on the top in Cienfuegos in the center area, which is where Che Guevara's favorite place. And if you're out on a cruise ship, as I was, I said, what is that? I mean, miles away, you could see this thing. And it was an entire city like Chernobyl, completely empty. And who knows what's there and why it's there. But the Soviets built it, and then as they collapsed, they sucked all their money back out of Cuba and left this giant thing there. Imagine if Americans had known there was a Chernobyl 90 miles off the coast. And I think that's really what we're talking about for people in Ukraine with 15 nuke plants. And we know from Chernobyl, if it goes as Chernobyl melted down, people, as I mentioned, in Scotland and Switzerland and anywhere land felt the effects of that.
Sweden was actually the first to pick up the radiation. And the bottom line is that, Putin, everybody's talking about Putin. He is clearly losing his mind, which is why Trump called him a genius, of course, and very savvy. But, to Putin, to make a nuclear apocalypse does not have to launch a single nuclear weapon. He can have somebody throw a hand grenade into the cooling system, for God's sakes, of any of the nuclear plants that are now in Ukraine. So, it's insane and incredibly dangerous. And, sorry, hold on.
While you're checking that out.
There we go. I got rid of it. So the bottom line is that this is why we do not build nuclear power plants, Cary. This is why atomic energy is the most expensive failure in human history. We have 93 reactors in this country that are equally vulnerable, and they are pre-deployed weapons of radioactive mass destruction. And you notice, by the way, I couldn't figure this out for a minute. The first thing the Russian army did was take over Chernobyl. Why did they take over Chernobyl? Because it's between Belarus and Kiev. It's only 80 miles from Kiev, 80 kilometers. And so the Russian army was able to march in through Belarus into the Chernobyl area, which is a dead zone. And there's nobody there. So they're just able to march right through because there was no resistance. Of course, they all got radiated. But, a small detail. So now you have all these radioactive guys marching to Kiev.
Yes, and they're conscripted. So you don't get to vote yes or no. Vladimir Putin says, poof, you're in the army. And you're going to march into Chernobyl. And I'll bet you these kids probably aren't super boned up on what actually happened there because they're all like 17, 16, 15. Let's talk a little bit, just so that people understand. We're talking 15 nuclear power plants in Ukraine. You knock down any of those, it's going to cover Europe. It's going to end up here too. It's going to definitely end up in our globalized food supply, in the air, into this, into that. What is a nuclear power plant? And I remember getting some really good training from the world's favorite doctor. And I'm spacing her name, and boy, she's a tough one.
Helen Caldicott.
Yeah, Helen Caldicott. She's a disciplinarian if there ever was one.
She's
bet,
awesome.
Baby. Yeah. And
she taught him not to build nuclear plants.
She did, and I'll tell a little anecdote about her first, and then I'll say what a nuclear power plant is in 1 minute or less, so that people really get it, because you're not going to know. So she was, in her infinite wisdom as a pediatrician at the time, Ronald Reagan was president, and she'd gone in and spoken before Congress and the Senate, and knew that it was all male at the time, as it was also in Australia. And the only way to get men to actually pay attention to the idea of radiation in the air, moving in and getting them, is where is the first receptacle for radiation? It turns out to be testicles.
Right.
And when you have a room full of men and you mention something is about to happen to their testicles, Harvey, am I right? The first thing we do is cross our knees and run.
That's right, right. Oh, and she had a 1 hour meeting with Ronald Reagan. She met Reagan's daughter, Patty, who posed nude for Playboy. She met Patty Reagan, or Patty Davis was her name, at the Playboy Mansion. And Patty Davis brought her to meet her dad. And Helen said it was the most terrifying hour she ever spent in her life, because he didn't know nothing, man. And the bottom line is that Helen Caldicott showed that radiation from nuclear plants will, in fact, make your genitals light up, and not in a good way. And the rest is history.
With real permanency. So let's break down so that people understand what is a nuclear power plant. Most of us think, well, it's basically kind of a nuclear bomb and it makes electricity. Wrong. What? But it makes electricity. No.
It makes nuclear waste. It boils water is what it does.
Yeah. So imagine if you have just a nonstop reaction that is so hot, then you put a pan of water on top. The pan of water boils and makes steam. And just like a locomotive in 1859, that steam turns a turbine, like a choo-choo train in 1859. And that turbine cranks and makes electricity. What? I thought it was some kind of newfangled. No, it's a water boiler, and a dangerous one at that.
Right.
So, Harvey Wasserman, you've been researching and writing on atomic powers since 1973, and you're among the very few journalists who investigated the health impacts of 3 Mile Island up close and personal. You co-authored Killing Our Own, The Disaster of America's Experience with Atomic Radiation. The ensuing media appearances on you were on Today, at Nightline, and Phil Donahue. Boy, there was an early,
Yeah.
wasn't there? Democracy
Kinda
Now!
dates me, yeah.
You were on Charlie Rose before he got the axe, and numerous other major outlets. So you're no stranger to this. We have our own issues right outside of LA here with, a couple of nukes, one built on backwards nicely on even on a earthquake fault, which is just high pleasure and lack of intellect. But these are not threatened at the moment by lunatics with hyperbaric bombs, missiles, 40 miles worth of vehicles. And Vladimir Putin's GDP is equivalent to approximately Los Angeles. All Russia. Yeah, it's tiny. So what does he have to lose? Or does he have to gain? Well, we know what he has to gain rebuilding the Soviet Union. Block by block, piece by piece, terrifying everybody. Would he use, as we did once upon a time in Gulf War I, where we had the daisy cutters, these low-level nuclear weapons, and we also used depleted uranium, which arguably is a low-level nuclear war.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But he's thinking bigger here.
Well, who knows what he's thinking? I think what he's thinking is suspect. From minute to minute. You got to remember that he is Donald Trump's mob boss. He has owned Donald Trump as a mobster since 1999, and you can see he's deteriorating as we speak. And God knows if he's rational, what he's really thinking. The problem is, and we have been warning about this. It's not like hindsight. We've been warning from the day one that you don't build nuclear power plants that can't be protected and that are vulnerable to any nutcase with a satchel bomb. I mean, look, they can lose, and this is true of Diablo Canyon too, by the way. We have 2 reactors up the creek in San Luis Obispo. Take about 4 hours for an apocalyptic wave of radiation to come on down and clear out 10 million people from LA County. That's the end of it in LA County if Diablo Canyon goes. And Putin, if he wanted to, could send some surfer dudes up the creek there to blow up Diablo Canyon. Wouldn't take but a hand grenade in the control room. So what you got is 15 of these things. They should never have been built. They shouldn't be operating. The Russia and Ukraine have more wind power than they could ever use. We've got all the solar power in the world. Germany is phasing out its nuclear plants. It's down to 3. After having 19. If California, the number 5 economy in the world, and Germany goes number 4, both go no nuclear, we will be headed in the right direction. But here you've got these residual reactors, which anything could happen to. I will tell you right now, Cary, that I think the odds on a major reactor disaster in Ukraine now are about 50-50. And because these are old plants. The guys could just leave, They're sitting in the control room. The Russian army's down the street. Are they going to stick around? Are they going to know what they're doing? If power goes out, the likelihood of power going out in Ukraine is very high. You have to have backup power to keep an operating nuclear plant safe. In Fukushima, I'm not making this up, Cary. When they lost backup power at Fukushima, the guys in the control room ran out into the parking lot and took the batteries out of their cars so they could run the control room. That's how fragile these things are. And those were American-made reactors, for God's sakes.
Let's jump in for a second. Harvey Wasserman, and just bring people up to speed on what this is and what it means. Cary Harrison here with you, by the way. You can get my free newsletter with transcripts of this broadcast that you can read and take your time, share around, plus stuff that we simply cannot say on the radio by going to goharrison.com, goharrison.com. Talking to Harvey Wasserman, who is not only a historian, but quite an expert on radiation and nuclear power plants. And what he's talking about at Fukushima is you have to bring in a ton of water to cool these plants. It is a 24-hour nuclear explosion contained in cement and lead. And if you don't put water in there to moderate the temperature, it goes critical and you get a meltdown. That's why these guys were getting batteries out of their cars. It didn't work. And that's why what's going on in Ukraine, these guys probably don't get paid anything. They're not educated. They're probably forced in there. They're going to want to split. If there's any problem, you don't want to hang around there. I mean, this is it's beyond frightening, because give us a sense of what happens to regular Europe even if two of these things get compromised by, let's say, one of these hyperbaric bombs, or what we know Putin has in the submarines that are so potent. The doomsday bomb that he bragged about a couple of years ago blows up underwater with such force, 20, 30, 40, 50 megatons, that it creates a tsunami, and then hammers the coast where a nuclear power plant is, and you just redo Fukushima all over again.
Yes, and Chernobyl and really Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Fukushima has released 100 times more cesium than was released at Hiroshima and Nagasaki. That's the scale we're talking about here. At Diablo Canyon in our state, we can't even get the governor to inspect these reactors. All these old reactors are embrittled and they're cracked. They can lose backup power. They cannot be sustained. We have 93 of them in the United States. They are really, really dangerous, Cary. If you go to the 15 in Ukraine, it's over the line. We are just walking on the edge here. I could take the next hour and give you 50 different scenarios of how those reactors could blow.
Well, I'm going to give you 7 minutes after this break, and we will wrap it up with everything you need to know. And
I never wanted to ask.
Put on your seatbelts.
Preventing truth decay. Truth decay.
Cary Harrison. Reality Check Live.
Women adore him. His lust is unquenchable. His animal magnetism knows no bounds. He's a man. He's a beast. He's Bullwinkle.
Oh, Bullwinkle.
Are you okay, dearie?
Oh, Bullwinkle.
Dear, are you having an asthma attack? You are. Somebody call an ambulance. All right, Judy, now take a deep breath now.
Yes, that's right. You can talk dirty to Bullwinkle, too. Have the moose with antlers satisfy your every bestial desire.
Don't stop. I'm almost there.
You're almost here? Boy, if I knew you were coming, I'd have baked a cake.
Bullwinkle, make me scream.
Well, okay. Your credit cards have been revoked.
Yes, talk dirty to Bullwinkle. Call 1-900-MOOSE-ME. $2 the first minute, $6 each additional minute. The moose is waiting to talk to you.
Hurry up and call. I'm in the mood.
Call 1-900-MOOSE-ME right now.
Listen while it's still legal.
Cary Harrison. Reality Check Live.
This summer, the United States Board of Tourism invites you to discover America. There's so much to see, so much to do.
This week is Watch People Die Week in Tombstone, Arizona. Celebrate death as a natural part of life with music from the Grateful Dead, the all-you-can-eat buffet featuring lots of dead plants and animals. And on Saturday, join 106-year-old Grand Marshal Mildred Perkins as we take her off life support and see how long she lasts. Death, it's life's after-dinner mint.
America, we'll celebrate anything.
GoHarrison.com.
Cary Harrison.
Harrison's Reality Check.
Reality Check Live with Cary Harrison.
54 minutes past the hour. I'm on with Harvey Wasserman. We're finishing up a conversation. We actually need to do a pledge request here, Harvey. That is part of our mission. We have done something very special this hour. We've done all content. So we're going to take the last 5 minutes. We'll have you on again, Harvey, to break down some of the other things we talked about.
But I have a better tech day. Everything. God forbid that the nuclear plants in Ukraine should work like my Zoom today. So,
no, people will relate to that. Use a different metaphor.
yes.
So let's talk very quickly.
Yes, please support the station, support you.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So KPFK, you can go to kpfk.org, kpfk.org. Did I say kpfk.org?
Yes, you did.
Yes, I did. kpfk.org, and you can click and make a donation. As you know, Greg Palast in the last couple of weeks has thrown in an extra $500 matching pledge each week because he loves the show. We love the show. We love doing the show for you. We know you love to enjoy the show as well and learn that which is not available out there generally because we bring it to you. That's why we went super long with all content to just take this last 5 minutes and ask you to go to kpfk.org and make a donation. Support this independent voice. Support a place where you're going to find out how many nuclear reactors are in Ukraine. You wouldn't have known that. You wouldn't have known that the Russians were still operating them, which means they could disoperate them just as quickly as they are operating them. To find out how the whole world is tethered together, that's why you listen to this independent public radio station. KPFK has the largest and strongest FM signal west of the Mississippi. 212,000 watts. Oh my God. It was one of the first to go online at this frequency, and it covers the entire West Coast all the way down to Mexico. And it is for you. It is your radio station. You own the airwaves according to the law. That's FCC. The listener owns the airwaves. So own up. Go in. Throw your $5 in, your $10, your $100, your $50. Support Harrison's reality check so we can continue to bring this stuff and give you a free newsletter that is going to be full of all the stuff that I don't dare say here without getting shot, so that I can get you this information. Go to kpfk.org, kpfk.org, make a donation right now. And when you're hearing this in a podcast or even 2 weeks from now, keep donating then. There is no off switch as to keeping this place alive. And just know we're in here doing it for free and for fun. Well, it's not so fun, but it is free. We're in here busting our fannies because we have to. If we don't do it, it doesn't get done. And I could be out doing some right-wing crap, making a pile of money, but I'd have to cut my own throat doing it, and I wouldn't last long. So instead, I come in here and I do it because I have to do it. Just the way you have to listen because you have to have this information, and we have to make sure it's freely available to you. kpfk.org. At any level, a donation will help a free flow of information, your information. And as I said, I will give you free IT help to bring you into the 21st and 22nd century with your electronics. My gift to you. Hey, Harvey, one final note on why folks should support KPFK.
No, you're only hearing this on KPFK. No one else is talking about the reactors in Ukraine, which is the number one issue that's going on there. It's an ongoing nuclear war, and only Pacifica, only KPFK, and only a genius like Cary Harrison is going to bring it to you. So you got to deal with this reality. They do need money. Send it in to kpfk.org. It's easy as getting on Zoom, which I eventually did do today. So even if you have a slight delay, just up the ante a little bit. Please support Cary, and please support this show and the station and the network. We really need you.
Thank you so much. That's world-renowned nuke expert Harvey Wasserman. Where a war in Ukraine, continued war, an escalating war could produce a 15 Chernobyl apocalypse. Hopefully not. Do get the free newsletter at goharrison.com. Make sure you support KPFK by going to kpfk.org, and I will look forward to seeing you via Greg Palast, who's sitting in for me next week.
Harrison's Reality Check.
Follow us on social media at GoHarrison.
Harrison's Reality Check. GoHarrison.com.
Thank you, bro. That was fun. You're the greatest.
Even when you're out among strangers, the moment you spot someone
anytime, as I say. Okay. Take care.